After waiting for over a year, Spider-Man has finally arrived to Marvel's Avengers, which now means that there are 10 characters in the game. We're officially in double digits now. As long as you're playing on PlayStation. Let's have a moment of silence to my fellow Xbox and PC players that can't play as Spider-Man. Just to clarify, this is only a review of Spider-Man, and I will not be talking about the other editions of this most recent patch, such as the Claw Raid and Shipments. With that being said, as per usual, I'll start off with the story. As due to being a hero event rather than an operation or expansion, Spider-Man doesn't really have much of a story to him. There's very few cutscenes, and the majority of his story is told through audio files that you unlock by progressing through his mission chain. I typically don't care about those kinds of collectibles in video games. Splatoon was really the only game where I actually did, because it really expanded upon the lore of the game in very interesting ways and provided some much needed context that we didn't really know we really needed in the first place. So with that being said, I didn't really care all too much about Spider-Man's story in this game. It really felt like I was just listening to the audio files just for the sake of listening to them, since it was all we had, and it's not like I was actually excited to discover the next part of the lore. However, there are some standout surprises in there, such as Liz Allen being part of this story, which I did not expect, since I wasn't expecting anyone from Peter Parker's personal life to be in this game. And, spoilers I guess, Alistair Smythe is also heavily referenced, and even has a voice actor, which makes me hope that we get a Smythe villain sector at some point, although that's probably not gonna happen. And I must say that Spider-Man not being voiced by Yuri Lowenthal in this game was a fantastic decision, because if they were hyping this up as their own interpretation of the web slinger, and they got the same voice actor from the Insomniac version to play him, at that point, you may as well have connected the games together in order to create the Marvel Interactive Universe. Although, let's be fair, if they did do that, Spider-Man would be the only character in this universe we'd actually care about, so if anything, I'm glad that the games aren't connected. Anyway, Evan Villarca totally called it when he said he thinks that Sean Chiplock is the one voicing Spider-Man. Hats off to you. You totally scored a bingo. Of course, I know Sean as the guy who voiced D-Luke in Genshin Impact, which, by the way, I just got D-Luke off of the Albedo banner while I was scripting this video, so that's a thing that happened. As well as the guy that SPD64 said should be the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog.
So the reason why I'm suggesting Sean Chiplock is, well, the range, you can see it, it's there, he's very talented. He can 100% pull off the teenager with an attitude, because a few of his roles have included voices similar to that. Again, I think it would be another case of he would actually embrace the role, he would really enjoy it, he's very active on Twitter, he actually streams on Twitch as well. He's just very cool, and I think he's similar to Max in that regard. Like, both Sean and Max are just really cool guys, honestly. I think that's part of the reason why I would like for either of them to be the new Sonic voice.
Although, he was also Joker in Persona 5, so thanks to Evan for that information, because I never would have known that if he didn't say that, since I haven't played that game yet. All in all, I do think he was a good choice as the character, although there is an occasional line that I think could have been delivered a little bit better. But I do like his take on Spider-Man, and just as I said with Black Panther, this is another case where I would love the voice actor to reprise his role in other Marvel projects such as an animated series or another video game. And I can especially say now that this guy could totally pull off being Sonic, so good taste there, Nicole. Although if I am to be completely honest with you guys, I still would have preferred for Neil Patrick Harris to return as Spider-Man in this game, but whatever. I'm fine with what we have. So now getting into the gameplay side of things, as previously mentioned, Spider-Man is this game's first hero event, and I definitely think that doing more of these in the future would be a good thing for this game, because it means we could get more heroes faster, which is definitely something the game needs, because only 3 characters per year is really lacking for a game that harps on being a live service title. So I think if we could increase that to 5 characters a year, I don't think that would be too bad compared to only getting 3 characters a year, just as long as they have other types of content in between hero releases. However, if there is a major critique I have with this hero event, it's that this mission chain is incredibly long and grindy. My goodness, I'm probably gonna get Spider-Man to level 50 before I finish this chain. That's how long it'll take you to complete this. Which especially sucks for the people who want to unlock the iconic suit as soon as possible. So if there is one thing to take note of out of this, it's that future hero events should be a lot quicker than this one. Now I will say one thing about Spider-Man that's immediately noticeable is that his running animation is hilariously bad, as well as his web shooting animation. I mean, when you consider how this game works, it does seem excusable, but I mean, Disney Infinity managed to make it look fine, so this game has no excuse. Now, as far as the traversal goes, Spider-Man's traversal surprisingly feels miles better than the other characters in this game. I thought his swinging was gonna feel pretty autopilot. I thought it was just gonna be like the 2002 movie tie-in game, or the Lego games where you just press X twice and the game takes over, but I'd say it's more akin to Disney Infinity and other Spider-Man games, where you hold down R2 to swing a web, and release R2 when you want to let go. And if you press X while you're holding on to the web line, Spider-Man will actually gain more momentum. I mean, it would have been great if the game actually told me that, rather than having to rely on YouTube comments to tell me that, but it's a great inclusion either way. You could move rather quickly with his web swinging without any loading issues, even with me playing this game on a standard PS4 model from 2013. So since this is the case, I feel like there's no excuse for them to buff the traversal of the other characters in this game, especially the Hulk, who feels like such a pain to move around with. And this should also happen considering that patrol mode is going to be a thing in this game at some point. As I've stated before, if the traversal is going to be exactly the same when patrol mode comes out, I think it's going to make going from place to place really boring in this mode unless I'm playing as Spider-Man. Now of course, Spider-Man does have sky swinging in this game, and that's completely what I expected, and I think that's totally fine, because I would rather have this than needing to actually be able to attach webs to surfaces, because a lot of the areas in this game would not benefit this gameplay style. So I'll gladly take what is more fun over what is more realistic. And as I've been saying time and time again, there is a complete difference between a game that was designed entirely for Spider-Man and a game that features him as one of many playable characters. So the people who were seriously expecting him to have Spider-Man 2 or Insomniac levels of web swinging already set themselves up for failure. One negative I do have about his movement is the lack of a double jump. I feel like he would really benefit from having one, and since Cap, Hawkeye, and Black Panther have double jumps in this game, why can't Spider-Man have one? Now, I wouldn't consider this part that big of a negative, but they also did not improve the skybox limit in this game. Of course, I wasn't expecting them to, but I do think it would have been a nice touch, because the skybox in this game has always been an annoyance for me and other players, and it honestly makes me wish that this game was next-gen exclusive, because if it was, they would most likely feel way more inclined to not have such an abysmal height limit, and they'd also just be able to do more with this game in general if it was only on PS5 and Xbox Series X. There's also wall running and wall crawling, but honestly, more often than not, I end up attaching myself to a wall when I don't want to, so it makes it feel like the game is working against me. But in the very few times I actually wanted to use this system, it worked out how I expected it to. Overall, I think serviceable is the right word to describe these mechanics. It is a good means of getting from point A to point B, and as I stated before, it feels a lot better than the other characters in this game, but you're obviously not going to play this game just to swing around in it. Now, going on the combat side of things, just as with Black Panther, Spider-Man was designed as a melee character, and I definitely think they did a better job with that than they did with Black Panther, because let's face it, we all went with ranged builds on Black Panther. Even I kind of did. Thankfully, the combat animations don't look as stiff and I'd even say unfinished as they did in the early gameplay demos, so fear not, that's not an issue. However, I do wish that his animations were a bit more quick and acrobatic like Black Panther's, but Spidey's attacks can still be dished out pretty quickly, and the animations are still pretty good, so it's not really a problem. However, I will say that Spidey doesn't really feel like the kind of character that you would use heavy attacks with, since his second heavy attack is the swing kick. Which, don't get me wrong, I love the swing kick, and I think it's cool that he has it in this game, but it's not really what you'd expect from a heavy attack, and is ultimately a mobile attack, so it ends up feeling like an odd choice. It is great that he has the web strike in this game, but something about it feels off in this game. I really feel like he constantly locks on to the wrong enemy, or just doesn't zip to an enemy at all, and ends up webbing a health canister instead. However, one thing about his combat that I feel like the web strike heavily benefits is that I feel like Spider-Man is the only non-flying character in this game where airborne combat actually feels good and user-friendly. So as a result of this, I actually have some gear on him that enhances his airborne combat. Attacking the enemies mid-air actually feels good and fluid. I can move from enemy to enemy without it feeling like a massive shot in the dark. And he's also the only non-flying character in this game that can dodge in the air, which is a complaint that I had with this game for quite some time, and is especially noticeable when playing as Hulk. I definitely think they should add a mid-air dodge for the other characters, even if you can only do it once. That's better than having nothing, which nothing is what we have right now. Spider-Man even comes packed with his own unique status effect, the web status. After an enemy has enough exposure to the web status, they get trapped in webs and become incapacitated. And this works on all enemies in the game, even small drones, and the big enemies such as Exos and Adaptoids. However, this does not work on boss fights, probably because the developers are too lazy to program an animation for it. Which I think really sucks, and basically means that Spider-Man will be pretty useless in OLTs and raids. When I first started playing as Spider-Man on my live stream, I thought that you wouldn't be able to change the status effects on the webs, but it turns out you can apply other status effects such as pin particles and vibranium to your web shooters, but it doesn't replace the web status effect, which means even if you're using gamma webs like I have decided to, you're still able to web up enemies, so that's a pretty cool inclusion. One thing that's interesting about Spider-Man in this game though, is that he's the only character in this game that can't block attacks. I think that's a bit of a letdown because I feel like they could have had some cool parry animations for him. This doesn't affect my gameplay style at all because I always just dodge anyway, and that's not exclusive to this game either. I always prefer dodging over blocking, no matter what game I'm playing, but it is pretty odd for Spider-Man of all characters to not be able to block. I feel like this would have made more sense for a character like Shang-Chi or She-Hulk, rather than Peter Parker. Obviously, Spider-Man is a character known for his agility, so being incentivized to dodge with him makes perfect sense, but I wish he still had the ability to block. I mean, they could have just had him block attacks with the web shield, like he does in Web of Shadows and Disney Infinity. So if he doesn't have a block ability, what is his intrinsic meter for, you ask? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because this is probably my favorite thing about Spider-Man's combat in this game. When you fully fill the intrinsic meter, you're able to perform a takedown on any opponent you want without having to stun them first. However, at first you won't be able to use this ability on bigger enemies like Exos, Adaptoids, and Hunter Crawlers, but there is an upgrade in the skill tree that will allow you to do so that eventually becomes a non-issue. And if you already have an enemy stunned while your intrinsic meter is full, if you perform a takedown on the stunned opponent, it actually won't drain your intrinsic, so you could do a takedown on a stunned enemy, then zip over to another one and use your intrinsic meter on that one. I find this very satisfying and user-friendly because it would suck if doing that makes you waste your intrinsic. Overall, I think this is a really cool mechanic and further supports Spider-Man being a melee character, since you are not able to fill the meter with ranged attacks. His heroic abilities also further support this gameplay style, and thankfully are a lot better than Black Panther's disappointing heroics. His support ability is the Spider Drone, which if you played Spider-Man PS4, you should know exactly what this is. But it can be customized to apply the web status with its attacks, or even be completely changed into not being an attack drone at all, and instead a way to heal both yourself and your teammates, which is a cool option. But personally, if I'm going to use a spider drone, it's obviously because I want a little extra offense. His assault ability is the Web Bomb, which once again, if you played Spider-Man PS4, you should know exactly what this is. I customized it so that whenever I use it, it will automatically fill my intrinsic meter, which I think further supports his melee-centric gameplay style, and this is also how I customized Black Panther's ultimate ability, so it makes it feel familiar to me. And last but not least, his ultimate ability is the Wrecking Ball. A gigantic web ball that slams onto the ground to do web status in a big AoE. I feel like you could get really fancy with customizing this one. The option that I use is for the Wrecking Ball to leave a web trap on the floor, so that whatever enemies step inside of it get further web status applied to them. But there's also another good option for it, which is to be able to apply web status to your melee combos, which means that Spider-Man is actually able to do what the community has been asking for ever since the OLT released, which is for melee attacks to apply status effects on every single attack, rather than having to do a finisher to be able to apply a status on enemies or bosses. But I do wonder if they're ever going to buff melee in that way. What will become of this customization option? Maybe it'll still be here so that even people who don't have gear that allows them to do so can still do this, or maybe it will be replaced with something else in the future. Definitely something to consider going forward. I am going to be talking about the suits now, so if this is something you don't really care about, skip to this timestamp in the video. So I usually don't really care all that much about cosmetics in video games, but when it comes to Spider-Man, Batman, and Iron Man, that's a case where I do care a lot about the skin selection, since those three characters have a large variety of S-tier outfits and long-running history to pick from. Sadly, Spider-Man's suit selection is incredibly disappointing in this game. You'd think for a character as big as Spider-Man that they'd do a better job with this, but sadly they did not. I love the classic suit. I love that not only this was included in the game at all, but that it's his default suit as well. So yay for this being canon, and yay to the fact that I don't have to pay for this. I still haven't unlocked his iconic suit yet, but judging off of the gameplay that I have seen from Evan Falarka, the suit does look better in motion than it does in still images, which is the complete opposite of how I feel about the other iconic suits in this game, other than Black Panther's, who I think looks great no matter what. Other than that, I do like the Bugle Boy and Costume Shop suits. The Noir suit is cool, even though they don't have the standard Noir suit in the game yet, despite the fact it was shown off before he released. Definitely an odd choice. And the Spider Armor Mark III is really cool too. I never really liked this suit until now. I didn't like it in the comics, I didn't like it in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 game, and I didn't like it in Spider-Man PS4 either. I always thought that this suit looked too bulky and over-designed, but I feel like Crystal gave a much needed update to this suit design. So if I were to purchase a Spider-Man suit, I'd definitely choose this one just from that principle alone. Other than that, most of Spider-Man's other suits in this game just look like cheap knockoffs of the suits in the Insomniac game. This is the high quality collector's edition Hot Toys figure, and this is the Chinese dollar store version. The fact that his suits are just the same suits we saw in Spider-Man PS4 is disappointing as is, because come on, you couldn't give us something else, like the Ben Reilly suit or the Superior Spider-Man suit? And of course, the biggest disappointment of all is that he doesn't even have the black suit in this game. Yes, I know it can be added later, but you're not seeing the bigger picture here. Just like with the Black Widow movie suit, this is an example of the game having free real estate and saying no. They definitely would have made more money if Spider-Man had the black suit on his release, because people would have been buying it when they actually cared. And this was also the same mistake that they made with Black Panther not having his MCU suits when he first came out. When they finally did put the MCU suits in the game, it was too little too late. And it's gonna be the same thing with the black suit. And yes, I know Spider-Man PS4 didn't have the black suit in it either, but that game had an actual reason for not including it, which is obviously that the black suit is going to be a part of the story in Spider-Man 2. This game has no excuse for this. And as of December 20th, 2021, Spider-Man still doesn't have any MCU suits in this game, which hopefully they will add one next refresh now that No Way Home has released. Otherwise, that's gonna be a major L as well. Hey, that rhymes. As Red Hot Sonic would say, I'm a poet, didn't know it. One last thing for me to say about Spider-Man in this game is that I got his power level up really fast. It definitely feels like getting power levels is a lot easier with the update, but I don't know if this was intentional or not. Maybe it was, considering the new power level cap increase, so they wanted you to be able to get to 140 to 150 quicker, so that it's less of a grind to get to that point, so that you can get to 175 easier. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if this wasn't intentional, since A, this game can never manage to do anything right, further evidenced by this update since a lot of people lost their resources, and some people were even unable to spend money in the marketplace, and B, it felt way too quick. I got him to power level 140 in just 3 days, spanning about 6 to 8 hours of gameplay. And I even created a build on Spider-Man that I like pretty much completely by accident, rather than actually experimenting with what gear I actually like on him. So that's all I have to say regarding my gameplay experience with Spider-Man in this game. He's fun to play as, but you're ultimately just doing the same things you've always been doing, just as Spider-Man, since he doesn't have a real story campaign. And I'll be completely honest with you guys, if this character was anyone other than Spider-Man, I probably wouldn't play this game anymore after I finish this review. Spider-Man makes me see the lack of content in this game in a new light, which is that there's really nothing to even do in this game. We're still running the same missions, fighting the same enemies that we've been doing for a whole year, especially since Wakanda was very underutilized as far as endgame goes. We're still fighting Taskmaster, Maestro, and Super Adaptoid for the 1 millionth time, and there's still no other game modes or other types of things to do or experience. This is still a game that has good gameplay, trapped inside of a web of a bad gameplay loop. And considering that Spider-Man was this game's last chance for redemption until the next expansion comes out, if the game can even survive long enough to get another one, it's clearly not going to make a massive turnaround anytime soon. And when the next expansion does come out, I don't think it'll be much of a night and day difference considering the current state of the game and the rate at which things are going. I mean, the fact that it took them 8 months to do a stupid cosmetic rework should be enough evidence as is. I used to disagree when people said that it would just be easier for them to make a completely new game rather than trying to fix all of the problems that their current one has. But now, I do actually agree with this statement. Until the next expansion comes out, I'll basically just be playing this game casually from this point forward. However, I can say that if you are someone who hasn't played Avengers in a while, I do think that if you're a PlayStation player, it would be worth jumping back into it since, as always, the DLC is free, so you have nothing to lose by giving it a chance, especially if you're someone who didn't play the Black Panther DLC yet, and especially more so if you played the game at launch and then never played it since then, because you'll have a lot more to do between the Taking Aim and Future Imperfect operations, War for Wakanda expansion, and Spider-Man event. If you're someone who wants to buy the game and you only care about the campaign stuff in the game, now that Spider-Man is here, I think you'll have the most complete experience possible for the time being. And under normal circumstances, I'd say the game is worth it for the campaign stuff. Especially with how cheap it is right now, but sadly, these are not normal circumstances, since the most recent patch makes the game unplayable. If you play through the Reassemble campaign and beat it, the game will soft lock on the last cutscene, and no matter if you choose single player or multiplayer, the game will always take you back to that final cutscene where it will always crash the game. So be aware of that, and if you are going to purchase the game, don't play it until this gets fixed. However, this glitch does not affect people such as myself, who have already finished the campaign of the game. Just don't replay the campaign, and you'll be fine. So that's my final verdict regarding Spider-Man and the state of the game. I'm hopefully going to be uploading this on Christmas to be this year's holiday special, so happy holidays, everyone.